Today I need you to be afraid. Let me tell you why and how. We are changing the world in wonderful ways with technology, but we are ignoring how much we are changing ourselves too. Human consciousness within a few generations may be unrecognizable to us, and that's okay in itself. It's happened before. But we need to build our new world with a courage that comes from a special kind of fear. First, let's consider the magnitude of some of the ways we're changing the world. We've entered an age of supercharged information everywhere, as billions of smartphones and small computers and sensors seek constant two-way communication with giant global computing systems. Just one of the average-sized data centers at my employer, Google Cloud, for whom I do not speak today, has in it enough computers to build a tower 5,000 feet taller than Mount Everest. Now, we may be the biggest one in the world, but there are several such facilities by several companies, and even more giant data centers going up. And this is wonderful. Artificial intelligence in the cloud parses data, seeking new patterns and new relationships, modeling and automating what had once been a painstaking search for knowledge. And new tools in the cloud will enable people to build things faster and better. And that will speed and democratize the ability to find new knowledge. If all art and commerce and science is based on pattern finding, then we may be on the verge of a new boom in human understanding, and perhaps the greatest ever. But that's just a small part of how we're building the world in new ways. Languages, which subdivide humanity, can now be translated in a single pair of earbuds. Genetic information, life itself, is a code that we manipulate. We make models and shapes and new materials that could not exist in the natural world. And software, that insubstantial series of if this, then that propositions, doesn't just eat the world, it recapitulates it to model things in new ways, furthering our understanding. Among today's speakers, you will hear visions of drones that deliver essentials to any point of need on the planet, of revolutions in mapping our brains and our oceans, of the prospect of living for centuries. Well, that sounds pretty good. So how do I need you to be afraid? When you change the world that much, you change people too. And we already see it in small ways. I know a few of you right now are feeling a little nervous because you haven't checked your phones in a few minutes, getting word of the latest urgency. 10 years ago, that anxiety would have been unrecognizable to you or to anyone else. And have you checked your heart rate on your phone? Have you live streamed with someone on the other side of the globe? Has the world talked back to you through augmented reality? You would not even have known 10 years ago what to make of such expectations, nor would you have understood a daily assault in your personal media of the latest shocking horror, which we all, in a desperate gesture to cause it to end, pass along to our friends. These examples are just intimations of what we might become, and they could be tenuous, and they could lead us in entirely other directions. But it's a good bet that within a generation or two, we will become something entirely new in how we see the world. Is that scary? Not really. It's happened before. Tech has changed consciousness, but usually by chance. The printing press came around just as Constantinople fell, flooding Europe with new texts. And these were translated from Greek and Arabic into vernacular tongues. Not long after, the Venetian printers developed something like the modern book, just as fresh wonders from the New World created more hunger for knowledge. And intellectual piracy and printing boomed. So did translation. 30 years later, Martin Luther became the world's first best-selling author by translating the Bible into vernacular languages. These were unprinted books that were created faster than they could be burned. And by translating God's word into their tongues, he translated the consciousness of millions, changing it forever. A few centuries later, The French Revolution's strange worship of reason created a passion for precise measurement. And precise kilograms and precise meters merged with the vectors of the machine age to create something else entirely new. Identical factories capable of creating identical products by the thousand. From this, we got repeatable goods that we consumed and repeatable experiences of consuming the goods. And that led to brands and advertising and a new world filled with desires. And factories changed the economy of how we eat and sleep. Centuries of unruly slumber became 8 hours of precise rest, the blank third of a supposedly rational life. So it's happened before, but this time we know we're doing it, and knowing it is new. Gutenberg didn't think, I'm going to change man's relationship to God. And the French Revolution didn't see themselves causing a birth of brands. But this time we know we're changing consciousness. We know the pattern, and knowing that we're doing it, that is new. But the really strange thing about that is, it doesn't seem to slow us down at all. I once asked a well-known tech billionaire, do you and your powerful friends ever think about where all this is going? Do you wonder about what the vectors of technology and history might merge together and create, how consciousness might change? What could an age of perfect awareness mean for the consciousness of our grandchildren? And he looked at me and he said, we can't. We're too busy building it. Of course he couldn't. He was a man firmly atop the engines of his age. He was loading up on the latest tech and rushing to outcompete his friends. Now, a word on the engines of an age. It's interesting, but they're always run on invisible forces and beliefs. These might be beliefs in a deity, or in the course of an empire, or in the fate of a nation. Ours, invisible forces, are the free market and the scientific method. Through them, we ask perpetual questions. What is the right price now? What does the customer want next? What is the data saying to us here? What is the best theory to explain that? What can we do that's new? Materially, our invisible forces have done more than Zeus or Marduk or the fate of Rome ever did for their people. We have conquered disease. We travel continents by air. We have lifted billions from poverty. Who could doubt that the endless questioning of the scientific method or the restless hand of the free market, the invisible hand of the free market, could be anything else? But something else unique about the engines of our age. And it's not just that they're real. Everyone always thought their invisible forces were real. Our success is because we dictate no final end. We mandate no heaven. There will never be a final price, and there will never be a final product, and no one theory will encompass all the data. More data will always show up. Where others had ends, we inhabit an eternal middle, eternally improving. And this has given us material miracles by suspending the final purpose, by setting eternity aside. But it came at a cost. We have abundance, but no one is likely to die for an eternal middle, the way they might die for a flag or a deity. And if there is nothing to die for, it's so much harder to know what to live for. And yet we're still creatures of narrative. We yearn for a conclusion, a judgment that weighs our efforts. And perhaps that's why so many of us are sad, or why we develop ideas that artificial intelligence will grow a mind so it will regard us and judge us and kill us, or why we feast on catastrophe in our social media and then pass it along in social terror. With this horror, we seem to say, perhaps surely the end is at hand. But this kind of fear is corrosive. The fear I need can be transformative. Fear is an awareness that the world is changing, that things are happening that you may not understand. It starts in the primal fear, the sound in the grassland, the shape in the night, the late call. In this kind of fear of the unknown, we cling tight to what we know now, and we desperately wish that nothing would change, and we fight to keep things the same. But our ceaseless world has become oppressed by this fear. It's been abused to bad ends. In politics, it's used to create urgency at all times, chasing out subtle thought and deeper understanding. In media, it's the thing that keeps you riveted and powerless. Many interests play on these fears, irrational hope that nothing will change. But it's bad for us, and it's bad for democracy, which at its best means living bravely with the unknown. And our world is changing. It's changing fast in ways that, even if they are abundant and good, we simply do not always understand. But rather than shrink in fear and hope nothing change, we need to embrace fear. Fear is also a natural response that keeps us sharp. It identifies to us what really matters. It prepares us for what lies ahead, even if we are unsure of what we may be at the end of the experience. Reaching into ourselves in fear is the timeless wellspring of real courage. It's recapitulated throughout our lives. We find it perpetually. You were afraid as a child as you grew new emotions and you connected with others and left your old self behind. An adult love is a kind of fearful madness as you change your life for someone, change your fate, not knowing what may lie ahead for the two of you. When women give birth, they change their bodies and fate for someone unknown. Parents may throw everything over that materially owned for their child. There's always fear there, but it's overcome by a human connection, as yet unknown. And there's fear in a creative frenzy when you yearn to touch a deep, eternal truth. That's the knowing fear at the heart of life. Everything may change, it says, come with me. Almost nothing worthwhile or lasting in our lives can be done without this fear. I've known this fear many times at the most important parts of my life. My father was a brilliant man who developed Alzheimer's disease, and I was scared when I had to tell him that his mind was going and he needed to move into care towards his final death. In an exhilaration of fear, I asked a woman I'd known only a few days to marry me. That was 30 years ago. We were fearful together at the difficult birth of our first son, and then a few years later when he was diagnosed with an autistic spectrum disorder. That fearful awareness and that desire to move forward is now part of his story as he pursues his graduate studies. You nod. We've all felt this kind of fear. People say we learn from our setbacks more than we learn from our victories. But I say we live more richly when we allow for that timeless fear to enter our lives, and we know that maybe there is no deliverance, and maybe there's only change, but we are called upon to be brave. The gods of the ancient Greeks were like capricious, unruly children, laying waste mortals for no reason they could explain. They were slaves to urges, even though they were deities. Their world was one of chance and chaos, no matter what sacrifice or caution or plan people made. And thus, they lived like people at a storm at sea, and they were brave for each other on the raft. And in our pattern-rich world of abundance and wonders, we all still know and travel on such waters. And what will we do there? We have to accept fear and find compassion for others on the raft. And that is why I need you to be afraid. Even the billionaire of the eternal middles must know fearful compassion as he loads up on his technology. We all must. Everything will change, and much unknown lies ahead. But we are always, always brave for each other. And then, even if our grandchildren's mind and sight are unrecognizable to us, and ours to them, something timeless will remain between us two. Thank you.